Hello everyone, my name's Jo Turner. I'm an Associate Professor of Criminology here at Staffordshire University. I'm part of the teaching team in Criminology. I do lots of research, so I just wanted to speak to you a little bit about what I do. And I have quite a variety of interests, but my main interest is in the history of crime and punishment, and especially looking around women's crime and punishment during the 19th and early 20th centuries. So that's where I started with my first doctoral research, and it's something that I've continued through ever since doing my PhD. So I looked at, I don't know if any of you are local, but I looked at Stafford, which is the county town of Staffordshire, and I looked at female offending in Stafford between 1818 and 1905. And I created a whole case study about recidivist women, and recidivist means those women that continue to offend over a period of time, so they keep coming back to court. So that was my main research that I still actually write about even now, and I've just had a chapter in a book being published just this week, so on one element of that PhD research. So that has led me through to a general interest in women's imprisonment, not only in the past but also in the present. So I have, I look at it through very much through a gendered sort of perspective. So looking through that feminist framework about the effect of imprisonment on women in particular. And that then has led through to an interest, well, I think really both combined, the interest in the history of crime punishment and the interest in the past and women's punishment in the present. I'm interested in how women, or how people, but in particular how women stop offending. So what happens to women when they've left prison? Again, interested in that in the past, so I've been developing that more recently, and I'm interested in that in the present. So I'm interested in what has in the past and what now is being put into place for people when they leave prison to help them to not return, essentially. So the vast majority of people that go to prison leave prison. They come back into society. So it's really important to look at what it is that we can do to help people not return back to prison. So that's something that I work on, I'm very interested in, and I work on. I'm actually in the early stages of writing a project, or not actually doing the work, but writing a proposal for some research into the history of aftercare for men and women when they leave prison. So going back to the early 19th century, to looking at those societies that sprang up to try and help people when they left prison, and then comparing them with the societies and the services that we have now. So I'm looking at a longer, bigger piece of work that's trying to join the two together. So you can see from that I'm very interested in not only female offending, but the history of female offending and the punishment of that offending. I'm also interested in, you can see here a picture of Woking Prison. And Woking Prison was the Victorians' answer to what they did with their prisoners that had disabilities. So as you can imagine, people with disabilities, physical and mental disabilities, commit crime now and in the past, and the Victorian prisons weren't built to cope with people with disabilities. So it was a question, and also the Victorian penal system was very much predicated on the idea of hard work. So things like the tread wheel, the crank, they were all devices designed really to institute hard work into the Victorian penal system. And obviously if a prisoner had got some disabilities, they were able to do that. So the Victorians really mulled over, you know, what it was they were going to do with these prisoners with disabilities. And in fact, what they did, they built Woking Prison, and that became one of the first, I suppose, really prison hospital places. So it wasn't really a hospital, but it was a place designed to hold people that needed to be kept in prison, or they wanted to keep in prison, that had disabilities. That's a piece of research that I'm currently undertaking, so looking at the history of that penal system and looking at what they did with prisoners with disabilities. But moving on to the present, I'm also very interested. I mean, again, this is all part of the criminal justice system, but I'm interested in police custody and the changes to police custody that we've seen in the past 10 to 12 years. So we've gone from a situation where we have local police stations that had cells, and they used those cells to hold people before they presented them at court, either the next day or within, you know, if it was a weekend, within a couple of days. A lot of those old police stations have been sold off, certainly closed and sold off, and now we have built around the country lots of big police custody suites, and these custody suites are much bigger than the old police stations that had cells, so they have quite a few cells, these custody suites. They're generally located outside of the main town centres, but still within not necessarily residential areas, but certainly business places or business parks. And of course, because they're much bigger, they have now, you know, the regulation of them has changed. So there's a lot of changes to police custody that hasn't been written about, and that's something that I've started to look at recently. I'm also a magistrate, and I'm very interested in the operation of magistrates' courts. So particularly the sentencing of defendants in magistrates' courts, how defendants are legally represented. So there have been big changes within the criminal justice system with legal aid. So many more people now are not eligible for legal aid and tend to represent themselves in court. And that creates quite a few logistical challenges, not only for the operation of the courts, but also for those defendants themselves, about whether or not they understand the court processes, the court terminology and language, and how they actually represent themselves. There are lots of other changes within magistrates' courts as well. You know, the move to a digitised system whereby magistrates use iPads. They have documents sent to them from the legal advisor through the iPad system. So again, lots of changes within what we call summary justice in the magistrates' courts. These changes also apply in the Crown Courts, but it's in the magistrates' courts that I'm particularly interested in the changes. So you can see that I've got quite a wide range of interests, research interests, and these are all areas that I've done research in, I've written about, and have an expertise in. So if anybody's interested in any of these areas, I'd be more than willing to speak to anybody about my research and your interests in my research. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me, and yeah, I hope I've inspired some of you. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.